Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Did you have the time of your life? Marcus's voice was calm, almost casual, but his words carried weight. Tracy glanced nervously to the left, then the right, her eyes finally landing on the table. She avoided his gaze, her discomfort evident in the faint sheen of sweat forming on her upper lip. The silence between them stretched uncomfortably, seconds creeping by like hours. With a cautious, sideways glance, she tried to read his expression. Marcus's face revealed nothing, no anger, no sadness, just a quiet neutrality that made the air between them heavy. Tracy wondered if his composure was worse than the explosion of fury she had anticipated. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, the tension in her chest easing just slightly. Marcus leaned forward, resting his chin on one hand, his elbow perched casually on the edge of the table. The soft, steady rhythm of his breathing filled the space between them, a stark contrast to her pounding heart. He said nothing, waiting for her to speak. Tracy reached for her wine glass, taking a measured sip in an attempt to gather herself. Finally, she exhaled and spoke, her voice barely audible. "Yes, I did," she admitted. "But you already knew that." "I did," Marcus replied evenly. "But hearing you say it matters. People sometimes change their perspective when they reflect on something. What seemed thrilling in the moment might not feel the same afterward, or it might still carry the same intensity. The passion, the pleasure, doesn't always fade." Tracy stared at him, absorbing his words. When did he become so introspective, she wondered. She took another breath, feeling the weight of his calm scrutiny. "So," Marcus continued, his tone unchanging, "do you regret it?" Her eyes lifted, meeting his at last. His dark gaze felt like a blade slicing through her defenses, cold, piercing, and devoid of the warmth she had once relied on. She spoke hesitantly, her voice trembling. "No, I don't regret it. It was an incredible experience. But I didn't mean to hurt you. It wasn't about that. For me, it was unforgettable." Marcus watched her intently, his expression unyielding. Tracy's gaze faltered once more, her finger tracing the rim of her glass as if searching for answers. "And because it was so unforgettable," Marcus said, his voice taking on a sharp edge, "you'll want to do it again, and again, which means I'll keep getting hurt, again and again." The gravity of his words hit her like a physical blow. Tracy's head shot up, her eyes wide with realization. "Marcus, I love you. I've loved you every single day since we got married," she pleaded, her voice shaking with desperation. Marcus shook his head slowly. "That's not love, Tracy. That's guilt. You're sorry because you betrayed me, not because you don't want to feel that way again. Deep down, you know you would, no matter how much it hurts me." His tone remained cold and detached, each word cutting deeper. He drained his glass of wine, the sound of it clinking against the table the only noise in the room. Rising, he walked to the kitchen, poured himself another glass of red wine, and returned to his seat, acutely aware of her eyes following his every move. When he sat down, Tracy's voice broke the silence, trembling as she spoke. "I'll admit it. I want to feel it again. It was the most exhilarating thing I've ever experienced. But I don't want to lose us, Marcus. 16 years of marriage, what we have is worth fighting for." Tears welled up in her eyes as she searched his face for a shred of compassion, a hint of the man she had shared her life with. But Marcus remained stone-faced, his expression as unyielding as granite. "You want both," he said flatly, "but you can't have both. That's not how this works. I never thought you could be this selfish." Her thoughts swirled in a storm of confusion and guilt. Selfish? Was he right? She shifted uneasily in her chair. "I don't want a divorce, Marcus," she whispered, her voice cracking. 16 years. There has to be a way to fix this. I love you." Marcus's expression hardened further, his tone resolute. "No, Tracy, there's no fixing this. It's already broken." His words hit her like a gavel, final and unforgiving. Her mouth opened in protest, her voice rising. "You can't mean that. If you love me, you'd give me another chance." His eyes narrowed, his voice turning icy. "Another chance? I've given you more than enough chances. I know you slept with him 8 times. Tracy's blood ran cold. How could he know? Her mind raced, the name Will Tolliver flashing in her thoughts. He had promised her he wouldn't say a word. Before she could respond, Marcus shattered the mystery. "I confronted him," he said with quiet venom. "It's amazing what a broken tibia can do to loosen someone's tongue." Marcus recounted the confrontation, his voice detached. He had found Will outside a bar, struck his leg with a metal pipe, and watched him collapse. A second blow to the face sealed the younger man's confession. 8 times, over a month. Marcus's voice pierced her thoughts. 8 times, Tracy. That's not a mistake. That's a decision. What Tracy didn't know was that Marcus had uncovered her betrayal long before confronting Will. He had returned home early from a business trip, catching her in the act and silently recording everything. Later, in a hotel room, he watched the video, his worst fears confirmed. Now Marcus's words came like a verdict. "I loved you once, Tracy, but this is the end." Earlier that summer, Marcus felt sure he'd seen the man at a picnic with Tracy. The image of the stranger lingered in his mind, prompting him to grab his laptop and start searching for answers. His efforts soon revealed the man's identity. Will Tolliver, an assistant vice president working in the same office building as Tracy for the past year. The photograph he found depicted a well-dressed, athletic blonde man. Marcus's own observations of Will confirmed the picture's accuracy. He was polished, fit, and undeniably striking. At 32, Will was a full decade younger than both Marcus and Tracy. A troubling thought gnawed at Marcus. Was Tracy's affection no longer his alone? Restless and unable to quiet his mind, he decided to drive home in the middle of the night. At 1 a.m., he parked in the driveway and scanned the house, shrouded in darkness. Slipping inside quietly, he crept toward the bedroom, half expecting to find Tracy and her lover entangled. Instead, the room held only Tracy, sleeping alone in bed. But something felt off. A faint, unsettling scent lingered in the air, a trace of intimacy. Shaken, Marcus said nothing. He closed the door and retreated to the couch in the living room, his thoughts churning. The following morning, Tracy emerged from the bedroom. Naked, she moved to the kitchen to make coffee. The sound woke Marcus, and he waited until she placed her cup on the counter before speaking. "I'll have a cup too, Tracy," he said, his voice breaking the quiet. The sudden sound startled Tracy. Her stomach tightened, and she froze, muttering a quiet curse under her breath. Before she could retreat, Marcus appeared in the kitchen. His eyes locked on the faint marks on her skin, leaving no room for doubt. "It's not what it looks like," Tracy stammered, but Marcus's sarcastic response cut her off. "I'm sure it's not," he said coldly. Tracy tried to leave, but Marcus stepped in her path. He pulled out his phone and pressed play on a recording. Her face drained of color as she watched the footage. "Where did you get this?" she demanded. "Filmed it myself last night," Marcus replied, his voice laced with bitter satisfaction. "Not bad for someone shaking with rage." Tracy's voice faltered. "You were here?" Marcus shrugged. "Oh, don't worry. I'm leaving now. I'll be back tomorrow, just like we planned. That should give you time to clean up and air out the bedroom. Not that I didn't interrupt anything this morning." His nonchalant tone stung. Imagine how humiliating it is to be the oblivious husband who found out this way. Tracy stood frozen as Marcus walked out the door, his indifference leaving her shaken. She knew the consequences of her actions had only begun. Meanwhile, Marcus drove to the room he'd rented. Once inside, he let the grief over his imploding marriage overwhelm him, sobbing uncontrollably before pulling himself together and stepping into the shower. As water cascaded over him, unanswered questions consumed his thoughts. Chief among them was why. Would Tracy ever give him an honest explanation for her betrayal? Until that night, Marcus had never doubted Tracy's love or loyalty. His feelings for her had been unwavering since the day they met in college. They began dating as seniors, and within weeks they were inseparable. 2 years after graduation they married, their bond strengthened by shared ambitions and a prosperous dual-income lifestyle. Children had never been a priority. They agreed to let life decide for them. Their physical intimacy remained vibrant, marked by playfulness and a consistent rhythm. Marcus took pride in ensuring Tracy's satisfaction. But something shifted when Will entered her life. Will's charm and good looks were impossible to ignore. As their professional interactions increased, Tracy found herself drawn to him in ways she hadn't felt in years. Subtly, she began dressing more provocatively on days she knew they'd cross paths, indulging in the thrill of flirtation for the first time in her marriage. Casual work dinners followed, which Tracy explained away as late nights at the office. Marcus's trust in her was absolute, leaving no room for suspicion. 6 weeks into their budding partnership, Marcus took a weekend trip, and Tracy informed Will. He wasted no time arranging a Friday night dinner. The evening's flirtation escalated, and when Will invited her to his apartment, Tracy didn't hesitate. That night felt exhilarating, a reawakening of long-dormant desires. For the first time in 18 years, Tracy was with someone other than Marcus, and the experience electrified her. By morning, she lay in Will's bed, feeling alive in a way she hadn't in years. They spent the day together, oscillating between passionate intensity and tender connection. Tracy couldn't help but compare Will to Marcus. Will's confident, magnetic presence left her wanting more. Less than 2 weeks later, she made another excuse to stay late at work, meeting Will at his apartment. Their encounters grew bolder, the secrecy heightening their allure. Tracy returned home frustrated that her time with Will was so fleeting, resenting Marcus's presence for limiting her. 2 weeks later, another of Marcus's weekend trips presented an opportunity. This time, Tracy invited Will to her home. She believed that being in her own space would deepen their connection, and Will saw the gesture as a significant step in their relationship. To him, it was a declaration that Tracy was ready to escalate their affair by sharing the ultimate betrayal, her marital bed. Tracy's relaxed demeanor set the tone for an enjoyable Friday night, and the evening's festivities only enhanced her mood. Her thrill peaked when Marcus made an unexpected entrance during her and Will's second intimate encounter of the night. Despite Marcus's firm intent to pursue a divorce, Tracy refused to accept his decision. Acting on the counsel of her attorney and the judge's directive, the couple was required to participate in 6 sessions of marriage counseling. "Mrs. Rains, what do you hope to achieve through these sessions?" Dr. Albertson inquired at the start of their first meeting. "I want to save my marriage," Tracy answered earnestly. "I know Marcus loves me and I love him. I made a mistake, and I'm ready to prove my commitment to him, no matter what it takes." Dr. Albertson turned to Marcus. "And how do you feel about that, Mr. Rains?" "Let's be clear," Marcus began. "I do love my wife, but I wouldn't call her actions a mistake. A mistake is something accidental, a one-time error. What Tracy did wasn't a mistake. It was a series of deliberate decisions. When someone keeps going back to the same place to satisfy their desires, it's intentional." His voice hardened. "It wasn't an accident, Tracy." "There won't be any more trips to that well," Tracy said softly but with conviction. "From now on, it's just you and me, Marcus. Forever." Marcus shook his head. "Once you went to that well, Tracy, there was no longer a you and me." Throughout the tense exchange, Tracy's unyielding smile stayed firmly in place, a brightness that unsettled Marcus. It felt to him like she was holding on to some hidden truth. Her demeanor didn't go unnoticed by Dr. Albertson, who gave a knowing but subtle smile of her own. Marcus's unease grew. Without a word, Marcus pulled out his phone and played a video. It showed Tracy and Will together in their marital bed. Tracy froze in shock while the counselor attempted unsuccessfully to intervene. Marcus let the video play for the full 10 minutes, sitting silently as both women looked on, stunned. "That was highly inappropriate, Mr. Rains," Dr. Albertson admonished. "If you pull another stunt like that, I'll have to report you to the court. You could be held in contempt." Marcus shrugged. "A few nights in jail might actually help me solidify my resolve to end this charade of a marriage." Leaning forward, his voice grew more intense. "But let's not miss the real issue here. You heard something today that wasn't in the court filings. Tracy's lawyer didn't lie to you outright, but they didn't tell you everything either. Tracy confessed to me that her affair had given her the best intimate experience of her life. She never regretted it for a second. Her only regret was getting caught and hurting my feelings. That's not remorse. That's not a foundation for rebuilding trust or a marriage. I'd give everything up for you, Marcus, Tracy said, her voice trembling. How noble of you, Marcus replied with a bitter edge. You'd give up your lover to keep your husband. Maybe you should explain that to the counselor. I'm done wasting my time here. Dr. Albertson remained silent, her expression betraying a mixture of shock and disbelief. Marcus's words had struck a chord, and the impact was palpable. The session ended abruptly, and with it, the counseling program. 6 months later, their divorce was finalized. Marcus sought therapy to rebuild his life and work through the trust issues he'd developed toward women. Tracy, however, wasted no time reigniting her affair with Will. Even before the divorce papers were finalized, Will had essentially moved into the home she had once shared with Marcus. Though their physical relationship continued, the excitement they once shared began to wane. The passionate thrill that had initially driven their affair gave way to a dull routine. Tracy couldn't help but notice the change. As she reflected on her choices, Tracy was haunted by an ever-growing emptiness. The adrenaline rush of forbidden love had faded, leaving behind an aching void. She found herself questioning whether she had traded a lifetime of genuine love for fleeting moments of excitement. A single tear slipped down her cheek as she wrestled with the enormity of what she had lost. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.